Shaman Gisbergen will have a new crew chief for the remainder of 2024, and Sam Mayer is not expected to return to Junior Motorsports in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to your video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We got a couple paint schemes to take a look at from the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Blaney's 2024 body armor scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. I like the black and the white. They've had a lot of good body armor schemes at Team Penske. This one's no exception. It looks amazing, looks pretty good, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2024 FedEx Reward scheme that we'll see this weekend at Richmond. This is a very interesting looking scheme. I like the orange number. I think that's the color of the number. I like the white. I like all the confetti among other things on it. It looks amazing. It looks pretty good. And I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Richmond. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Parker Retzlaff's 2024 X Insurance scheme that we will see this weekend at Richmond in his NASCAR Cup Series debut. Scheme's okay in my opinion. The colors are fine. It's got some decent colors for sure. It's really cool to see, though, that they've got a sponsor for this weekend in MBM's return. Glad to see we'll see Parker Retzlaff make his debut. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Richmond purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $7,925,121. And for the Truck Series race, it's $744,784. Cup's got some pretty good purse money for the weekend. Obviously, with the charter agreement and all that stuff, they tend to get a lot more money. But for the Truck Series, a little bit disappointing, all things considered. I wish that was a little higher, especially since there are cars going home this week, and I hope that in the next TV deal for at least the Truck Series, we could see a little bit of an increase in those purses, because I think it's a little bit of lack of purse money in my opinion. But nonetheless, that is the purse money, though, for this weekend at Richmond. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about national debt relief. As it was announced on Wednesday morning, the National Debt Relief has become an official partner of NASCAR. I believe National Debt Relief was a partner of the Chicago Street Course earlier this year, and now they're going to be working with NASCAR throughout the remainder of this year and for many years to come, as I believe this partnership is a multi-year deal. This is really, really huge. They're going to be spotted at Richmond. They're going to be a big partner when it comes to debt, among other things, trying to get relief in this country, obviously. And I think it's really good and great to see that they've done this. And I think it's pretty awesome to see that they've got a partnership with the National Debt Relief. Really awesome, great stuff overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As Kyle Larson, of course, is competing at this year's Knoxville Nationals, and he needed to go and win the A-Main to lock his way into the A-Main for Saturday night. Well, Kyle Larson did it. For the fourth straight time, Kyle Larson has won another dirt race and won the Thursday night feature for the Knoxville Nationals. Kyle Larson started in 6th position, had a really good qualifying draw. I think he started around 8th or 9th in the main race and got up to the top of the field. Kyle Larson, I think, has got a really good chance and opportunity to win another Knoxville Nationals. I think he's trying to become like the 7th or 8th driver to win 3 Knoxville Nationals, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Larson's got a really good chance and opportunity to do that this year. So I'm really happy for Kyle Larson to see him get it done. Kyle Larson's one of the best drivers in the world. He's not even in the best equipment. They're doing this on a budget for Paul Silva's team, but they know how to get it done. So I'm really happy about this and really happy to see that Kyle Larson got it done. Congratulations to Kyle Larson on winning the Thursday feature. He will now compete on Saturday evening to try to win another Knoxville Nationals and try to use that momentum for the Cup Series race later at Richmond. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Talladega truck race. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Wednesday afternoon that the Talladega truck race has adjusted their start time from 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Obviously, they've already shortened the truck race from 250 miles to 225 miles, but the reason they've changed the start time of this race is because when the race was originally supposed to start. Obviously, this was supposed to be a 250-mile race, but because Talladega does not have lights, they had to find a way to shorten it. I don't understand why you schedule a race on Friday night in the first place. I think that they probably should have scheduled it for Saturday morning before the Xfinity Series race happened. But then again, you could run into those issues where you do have weather issues as well, potentially rain delays, among other things. And I guess that's why they moved it. Also because of college football, from what I understand, is another reason why this is happening. So, though, it's very interesting for sure. I'm glad they moved the race up half an hour. It probably will actually play a major role in getting all the race in, considering it's only a 225-mile race. I'd imagine they're going to be able to get all the laps in and the whole event in, unless, of course, there's a lot of overtimes and there are red flags as well. So I think it's one of the best decisions they've made so far this year, and I'm glad to see they've gone ahead and adjusted that start time to be a little bit earlier. Next year, when it comes to schedule, because we know schedule's coming really soon, let's just start the race a little bit earlier, please, if we're going to have these races on Friday night going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about pass-through penalties. Now, NASCAR updated a lot of the rules over the week, and one of the rules that came out was in regards to pass-through penalties if you see one before the green flag drops. NASCAR now states that if a driver has a pass-through at start, they must serve it under green. So, for instance, if there is a caution that happens on lap 1 of the race coming to lap number 2, you can't serve that pass-through during that time. You're required to now serve that green. We've seen drivers kind of exploit this. Joey Logano kind of exploited this in Atlanta earlier this year, where he actually had to serve a pass-through penalty for a hand situation or some sort of other penalty, if I remember correctly. And Logano had to technically, because of what happened to Daytona with the hand glove situation, he had to serve a pass-through penalty for that, and NASCAR caught him for what happened at Atlanta. And he served that under caution, and there was a big wreck that happened in lap number 2, and he got lucky because he did not go a lap down. I think this is not a bad decision, all things considered. I know NASCAR's made some bad decisions this year, but I think this is not a bad call. And honestly, having a rule for this is not a bad decision, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about red flag procedures. As another rule that NASCAR updated over the week is the red flag procedure. According to NASCAR, NASCAR will have a push distance limit on all oval tracks going forward, to where if you go a certain distance too far out and you can't push too far ahead, you will go to the tail end of the longest line if you can get your car or truck refired and ready to go. This has been a rule in road course racing, but now it's coming to ovals. Now, I question this rule a little bit, especially if you're having a situation where you might run out of gas or run out of fuel. I think you do have, I get why they're doing this rule, do not get me wrong, but I do question why they have this rule at all, in my opinion. I think they could have gone away with this rule personally. I just don't understand it. I kind of don't get it, and I wish that they didn't have a distance rule, because now you're opening up to a can of worms where NASCAR could basically play a way in how the races play out, and honestly, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that NASCAR is going to have a say on what happens there. I'm not the biggest fan of this change, in my opinion. It's not the greatest decision that NASCAR has made, in my honest opinion, when it comes to this rule. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about BJ McLeod. As it was announced yesterday that BJ McLeod will drive the 78 for Live Fast Motorsports in a couple weekends at Atlanta Motor Speedway. BJ McLeod has made select starts so far in the NASCAR Cup Series, pretty much in every single Super Speedway race, Daytona, Atlanta, and Talladega. Earlier this year, he did lead a Talladega Super Speedway before I believe he had an engine issue or an engine failure at the end of the race. And now BJ is back in Atlanta Motor Speedway. They're going to be having ECR engines in those truck cars, from what I understand, and I think that BJ McLeod could honestly have a really strong chance and a good opportunity for a great run at Atlanta, because they're going to be fast. We've seen BJ show speed at Talladega, and I don't think fuel mileage will be a big issue at the race, so I think that he will have a solid and good run. That being said, I'm really glad to see BJ back behind the wheel, and I really hope he can do a really great job when we do go there later this year in September, which is like 4 weeks away at this point, but I'm glad to see BJ McLeod will be in the 78 car later this year at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon that AJ Allmendinger will drive the 13 for Kaulig Racing at Talladega Super Speedway. Now, AJ's got a couple other Cup starts that are expected to happen later this year. We'll talk about that with Shane Van Gisbergen here in just a second. But AJ will be running at Talladega in a third car. We have seen Kaulig now run this car in multiple different races. We're going to see the car at Watkins Glen. We've seen it run at Circuit Americas, and we've seen it run at Sonoma as well. I believe at Circuit Americas, AJ Allmendinger got a top 10 finish. And at Sonoma, I think AJ also got a top 10 in that race as well. I think AJ is a really solid super speed racer. He actually won the Talladega Xfinity Series race back in 2022. And one of the best things about Kaulig Racing is usually their super speed program is pretty good. Now, he's going to have a little bit of a controversial sponsor, unfortunately, which a lot of people saw that and they're kind of questioning why he's got that sponsorship in the first place. But I'm glad to see that AJ is running in the NASCAR Cup Series race. There are rumors he might be moving back up to the Cup Series full time potentially next year. So getting the experience in the Cup Series once again and having that experience, I think is a really, really great decision to get him prepared potentially for next year. So I'm really excited for that. I'm glad to see AJ back behind the wheel in the Cup Series, and I think he could do a really good job. We'll see how he does, and we'll see if AJ Allmendinger could have a really strong and great run. I think AJ is a talented race car driver, and I hope he's back in Cup next year, but I think having this experience in the NASCAR Cup Series, getting a little more of it, does make a ton of sense. Glad to see he'll be in the 13 car later this year at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alexander Rossi. As it was announced yesterday that Alexander Rossi is officially medically cleared to return at Worldwide Technology Raceway next weekend for the IndyCar Series and will be back behind the wheel of the number 7 car for Aaron McLaren. For those who did not watch the race at Toronto, Alexander Rossi got injured basically during, qualifying. I think he injured his wrist and thumb and had to unfortunately sit the race out. And they believe they brought Teo Pochero to substitute in for that race. Now Alexander Rossi will be back behind the wheel. We know he will not be back with Aaron McLaren after this year. There's rumors he could be headed to Rahal going into 2025. But I think being back behind the wheel is really great to see. And I'm happy that he's been medically cleared to get back behind the wheel. A thumb injury or wrist injury is very, very serious and something to not kind of mess around with. So I'm glad that he went and got this taken care of. I'm glad they took precautionary tails. And I'm glad to see overall that they're taking good care of him here. And I'm very happy to be back behind the wheel this weekend. So glad to see he's been medically cleared to get back behind the wheel, and hopefully he can be back and be very, very successful with him. He's a good oval racer, so we might see him have a good chance and opportunity to have a really good run at Worldwide Technology Raceway next weekend, which I might be there, but I'm probably not going to be there, unfortunately, to be honest with y'all. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Yuri Vips. As it was announced on Wednesday that Yuri Vips will drive the 75 for Rahal Lerman Lanigan Racing in a couple weekends at Portland. Yuri Vips will make his season debut. He'll become the 43rd or 44th driver to make a start so far in IndyCar this year. Yuri has been rumored to potentially be full-time with Rahal going into 2025, and Bobby Rahal has been really happy with the commitment that Yuri has had to the organization and team, which is why he's being rewarded with a start in IndyCar this year. They were hoping to give him a run full-time for 2024, but obviously that did not end up happening. Now, obviously, with the rumors of the charter deal coming in for IndyCar, we do know that there is probably not going to be a chance for them to run a 4th car for a majority of the year. There are rumors he could be in the 30 car, but I think Yuri's a very talented race car driver, and I'm glad to see that he will get the chance and opportunity to make a run at Portland. He was pretty impressive in the select starts he had last year, especially at Laguna Seca, where he's running top 5, top 10 in the early portion of that race. I think Yuri Vips has a lot of potential, and I think Yuri could have a really solid and great run with Rahal next weekend in Portland. Glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to make his season debut, and we might see him full-time in IndyCar in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen and AJ Allmendinger. Now, we're going to talk about Kaulig Racing 2025 plans here in just a little bit, but Chris Rice also confirmed that Shane Van Gisbergen and AJ Allmendinger will both run the NASCAR Cup Series race at Watkins Glen in September. Here's the plan. AJ Allmendinger is going to drive the 13 car with Gold Bowling sponsorship, and Shane Van Gisbergen is going to drive the number 16 car. Now, SVG is expected to get support from Trackhouse Racing in that run, and AJ will get just support from Kaulig Racing. Now, I think SVG has a really good chance to win the race at Watkins Glen. He's been the best road course racer all year so far. He probably should have won Chicago earlier this year, and I think that he's the favorite to win Watkins Glen for the Cup Series race just because we know Australian drivers have done extremely well at that racetrack in recent years. So I think that SVG has got a really good chance to go out there and win. AJ's been good also at Watkins Glen, though, so I think he will also have a good chance and opportunity to go out there and win that race as well. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for both of them. I think they've both earned the right and opportunity to get the chance to see what they can do. And we know SVG's got a few other races scheduled. Las Vegas, I think he's going to run Daytona in a couple weeks as well, which is really exciting. So he's going to get more starts, and I think in the next couple weeks, we should be knowing SVG's future. Nonetheless, really glad to see this for sure, and glad to see both drivers will get to run at Watkins Glen later this year. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lawless Alan. As it was reported by Agustin Canapino from Motorsports Wire that according to the roster portal, Lawless Alan will drive the 15 for AM Racing next weekend at Michigan, making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. The 15 car will have to qualify their way into the race if of course, there are a lot more cars that enter, but this will be Lawless Alan's debut. Now, Lawless Alan currently competes full-time in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, driving the 33 truck for Raymond Brothers Racing. Now, I'm going to be real and honest. We've seen Hailie Deegan drive this car earlier this year, and let's be real, she did struggle in that car. Then they've brought Josh Berry in, and they've brought Joey Logano in to make some select starts. Joey got a top 10 with the team, while Josh Berry struggled for the few races, though they had tire issues, and of course got caught up in the big incident on lap number 1. I'll be real and honest here. I expect Lawless to unfortunately struggle. Now, he could prove me wrong, and he runs really, really well, but I don't think Lawless Alan is going to run really well in the 15 car. Lawless, I don't really rate that highly as a driver. He does bring sponsorship, which is why he is getting this chance and opportunity. I feel like a Cup Series driver would have made a lot more sense, like someone in the 4 camp, like a Joey Logano again, like a Josh Berry again, perhaps, or someone like a Harrison Byrne who could be going there next year potentially, but we could see something like that. I just wish they could have gotten a Cup driver to get behind the wheel instead of Lawless Alan, but I guess if you got sponsorship and funding, you're going to get those chances and opportunities. I really hope Lawless can have a good run, but like I said, I'm really not expecting much. I do think Lawless Alan, unfortunately, will struggle, and I don't think he will have a good run with AM Racing at Michigan. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Agustin Canapino. As it was announced on Wednesday evening that Agustin Canapino has officially parted ways with Juncos Allmendinger Racing. This is a rumor that was starting to circulate all the way back on late Tuesday from Jefferson Kern, I believe, on Twitter, who's a big reporter from, I believe, Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, and he started reporting this likely was going to happen. Now, they have not announced who the relief driver is going to be. Rumors are that Connor Daly most likely will be behind the wheel of the 78 car for, I believe, the Ovals, and there's rumors that Devin DeFrancesco potentially could maybe go full-time with the team next year. But let's talk about this. Obviously, this is a little bit of a surprise to some people, but if you've been paying attention to all the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes with social media, among other things surrounding Agustin Canapino, you're not really surprised or shocked to see this, because Agustin Canapino has been under a lot of fire from some of the stuff on social media. Obviously, the team got really frustrated with that, and that's why Agustin Canapino, unfortunately, sadly, some people lost his ride with the team. And obviously there's a lot of people at the team that are not very happy, but they wanted to move on, and they're making a lot of moves over there currently at the moment. There's a lot of investors coming in, and there's some big things happening. And I just feel, and you look at Augustin's work, right? He just wasn't that great at IndyCar. His best finish was 12th. He had a couple top 10 starts, but he just struggled mostly, and he wasn't really impressive at times. I know he was good at Indianapolis, but he unfortunately got caught up in some of the incidents last year and was moving to the field, and like I said, unfortunately got caught up in some of the incidents and wrecks. To me, when I think of Agustin Canapino, he really wasn't that great, in my opinion, in IndyCar. I don't know what he's going to do going forward, but I would imagine that Agustin Canapino, unfortunately, will no longer be in IndyCar going forward, and will be focusing on different stuff going into the future. Maybe going back to Argentina racing in a different series. That could be a potential possibility. So we'll see what happens in the future in regards to Agustin Canapino, but he's done with them, which, again, for some people, it's unfortunate, but for me, it's not a major shock or surprise, considering all the stuff that's been going on with him. I'm not really shocked or surprised to see that Agustin Canapino will no longer be behind the wheel of the car, considering he struggled and was not running very, very well with the team and the organization, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Liberty Media. As it was reported by Motorsports.com, that Liberty Media is facing an investigation by the Department of Justice over rejecting Andretti Global's F1 bid. We know Andretti Global has been trying to get in the Formula One over the course of the last couple of years, and originally the FIA had approved them to get into Formula One, but Liberty Media basically stepped in and said, nope, you're not eligible to come into Formula One. Obviously, they were willing to pay the $200 million thing for the Concordia agreement to get into Formula One. But speaking of that Concordia agreement, they are allowed to actually have 3 more teams in Formula One for the Concordia agreement through 2026. And they've obviously been denying a lot of these teams to get in. And it's obvious because all the teams in Formula One, they don't want to find a way to get in. Obviously, got Williams is trying to find a way to pry Cadillac from them so Williams can work with Cadillac. But Cadillac has stated, no, we are not coming to Formula One unless Andretti themselves is going to Formula One. So that's why they went ahead and denied that, unfortunately. Now, obviously, having the government involved is actually really, really huge and absolutely wild. And I think that there is going to be some big stuff coming out from this. Obviously, Liberty Media is under investigation for this kind of stuff. And it's a really huge deal, all things considered, right? Because having the government involved to kind of investigate what is going on with the company that's been a little shady in the past, some of the stuff they've done, it does make a lot of sense. All things considered, right, to have them involved to try to figure out the situation over there. Now, obviously, if they find investigation, they're probably going to have to let them in because Liberty Media is a U.S.-based company, which is why they're being investigated. And what's really frustrating, too, you see this post come out from Adam Stern, where they're going to be allowing a garage space for a restaurant. So you have enough room for a restaurant space for a $35,000 restaurant, but you're telling me you don't have enough room for a garage for Andretti to come in, who's going to bring a lot more value than a steak restaurant? You're kidding me with that. That's why Liberty Media is investigating them as some of the stuff that they are doing currently at the moment, some of the stuff that they've been involved in recent years. To me, this is a really, really good decision that they're doing this, that they're getting involved, and I really hope they can find a way and get some justice in this situation so they can absolutely find a way to get Andretti officially into Formula One in the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Juan Pablo Montoya. As Juan Pablo Montoya did media availabilities yesterday and was asked questions surrounding why did you decide to come back to NASCAR? He said, why not? But I wanted to go ahead and try out something new. I don't really have anything going on in my career currently at the moment, as I've already accomplished a lot in motorsports. And basically when Steve Allmendinger asked him to get the chance to drive for the organization, he said, why not? Juan Pablo Montoya, remember, we talked about this on the channel earlier this week, that he will make his official return to NASCAR for the first time in 10 years since the 2014 Brickyard 400 when he drove the number 12 car for Team Penske. He will be behind the wheel of the number 50 car, which is formerly number 67 car for 2311 Racing. Now, Juan Pablo Montoya is a former winner at this track, as he did win in 2010 driving for Chip Ganassi Racing. And very interesting to know, if I remember correctly, didn't Steve Allmendinger work at Chip Ganassi Racing? That's probably, and there are people from the Chip Ganassi Racing organization that are over at 2311. That's why this deal is getting done, and Mobile One obviously has worked with Juan Pablo Montoya in the past, which is why they're involved with this decision as well. I think Juan Pablo Montoya has a legit chance and opportunity to go out there and win. He's one of the best drivers in the world, and every time I've seen that guy race, he goes up front. Obviously, people thought at one point Carlos Busch was going to get behind the wheel of this car, but obviously that did not end up happening. And having Juan Pablo Montoya there to help the program, be there, of course, and help Bubba Wallace as well, who's a really good, gotten better road course, and help Tyler Reddick, who's one of the best road course racers in the world. That's going to be a huge advantage for both of those guys as well when we do go to Watkins Glen. So I'm very happy to see Juan Pablo Montoya back in the series once again. I think he's going to do a really solid and great job. I think he has a really good chance and opportunity to go out there and win the race. I think he's going to have a very good chance. And I'm glad, like I said, very happy and glad to see that Juan Montoya will be going forward, working with the team. And for many, many years ago, not for many years, but at least at Watkins Glen, and maybe in the future we could see him run some more races, but I don't expect him to run more races than Watkins Glen going forward. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch Motorsports. As it was reported by Adam Stern that Kyle Busch Motorsports has been awarded a $105,000 judgment in its lawsuit against Rev Racing. We talked about this early in the year, but originally Kyle Busch Motorsports and Rev Racing had a partnership last year when KBM switched from Toyota to Chevy when Kyle Busch left Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of 2022. But it came out that Rev Racing was not giving the payments that KBM was really looking for, so therefore they decided to go ahead and sue them for a lot of money. Now, $105,000 in Truck Series standards, that is some pretty good money, all things considered, and that's pretty much almost all the payment that they still owed KBM, so they were basically just asking for the money back that they were using. Now, maybe Kyle Busch can find a way to bring his Truck Series program back. Kidding, just kidding. But at the same token, same time, getting the money from the lawsuit is really, really good. It's a big win for Kyle Busch, and considering Kyle Busch has had a bad year overall so far this year, at least Kyle Busch can say now that he finally has a win in 2024, where he basically has something that actually went his way. He needed that break, obviously, for sure, but I'm glad to see that at least Kyle Busch was able to at least get a win for this year, and I think it's absolutely huge that they were able to win their legal case, because again, sometimes these legal cases can go really, really bad. I'm glad to see that KBM was able to win their legal case, and now they can focus on going into the future. Basically, they don't have to focus on this stuff anymore, and I'm glad to see the lawsuit in the legal case is officially done. And I'm glad to see the KBM was able to go out there and win their legal case. Now they can put that money toward Brexton's career in the future. And maybe if Kyle Busch ever wanted to bring KBM back to NASCAR together, he could use that money to try to bring Kyle Busch Motorsports back, which obviously I think would be really fun to see KBM be back in NASCAR. So really happy about this nonetheless, and glad to see that Kyle Busch was able to win his lawsuit against them overall. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about wet weather tires. As it was originally reported by Jeff Gluck, that NASCAR will no longer dictate when teams can change tires in pit road. Now, when I originally saw this tweet, I was very, very happy. But then there was a lot of clarification that came out from this. Jeff Gluck notes, just to clarify, you cannot still switch from wets to slicks when it comes to the wet weather tire situation. If you are on the wets, you still have to remain on the wets. You can't just go from wets to slicks. Now that disappointed me a little bit, but at least I think NASCAR is headed toward a step at least in the small right direction, right, where they're at least going to allow teams to change tires, because NASCAR originally, they dictated, especially in New Hampshire, they were dictating when you had to go ahead and change those tires. Now they're not going to be dictating when you have to go ahead and change those tires, at least for the wet side. It's kind of like when you go on slicks, right? When you go to slicks, you can change slick tires, which I think at least is a step in the right direction. But I really wish the NASCAR would just put their hands off altogether and they let the teams make the decisions for themselves. Because I think that at least you're not handcuffing them as much as you were handcuffing them, but you're still handcuffing them in a big way, if that makes any sense. So getting the handcuffs off these teams and these drivers as well is overall going to make a lot more sense for strategy and for the racing product to be a lot better, because I think the racing product, at least for the short tracks and stuff, because you can do that in road courses, right, where you can put on wet weather tires and you can put on slicks and change it throughout the race. NASCAR doesn't really dictate that for the road courses. I think how they do it road courses is the way to go. Now, I think eventually NASCAR is going to eventually take all the gloves off everything, and I think they're eventually going to let everybody do what they kind of want to do, which is if they want to put wet weather tires on and then go to slicks eventually, they're probably going to be allowed to do that. So at least we're kind of headed toward a step in the right direction on that front in that aspect, but at the same time, I wish NASCAR would just take the hands off altogether and they would not go ahead and put their hands on it so that teams can make whatever decisions that they want to overall make. Nonetheless, very interesting stuff for sure to see. It's kind of good in a way, but it's also kind of bad in a way as well, because I do feel like that teams should be able to have their hands off and they should be allowed to do what they want to do and not let NASCAR control what they're doing when it comes to the wet weather tires. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about David Wilson. As it was announced Wednesday late morning that David Wilson will retire from being the TRD president at the end of 2024. Tyler Gibbs, who has no relationship to Joe Gibbs, will become the new TRD president at the start of 2025. David Wilson has been with TRD for nearly 34 to 35 years, and he's led and gotten a lot of things happening. He brought Toyota into NASCAR in the Truck Series, won multiple championships in the Truck Series with Kyle Busch Motorsports, and of course, Thorsport Racing won championships in trucks as well. When they were with Toyota, we saw Johnny Benson win, and then of course in the Cup Series, Kyle Busch has won a championship with Toyota. Mark Truex Jr. has won a championship with Toyota under David Wilson's guidance. We've seen other drivers come over and drive for Toyota. Bubba Wallace has been with the team for the last 2 years. Carl Levers came over. Kurt Busch came over and drove for Toyota. And we've seen a lot of big names come over and drive for the Toyota brand. Tyler Reddick originally was a Toyota driver, left them, and came back to Toyota. And we've seen David Wilson lead a lot of success. David Wilson, though, also has been under a lot of fire for some of the development stuff that's going on with TRD. They've lost a lot of big names at times. They lost Bubba Wallace originally when he went to Ford. They've lost other big names like Kyle Busch in recent years. Brandon Jones, who went back to Chevy, who could be going back potentially to Toyota in the future. Riley Herbst left the organization, and he might be going back to Toyota potentially next year. But Harrison Burr was originally a TRD driver, and he's gone over to Ford. Noah Gragson was a TRD driver, and he went over to Ford. So they've lost a lot of big names. But David Wilson has still led a lot of success for the teams and organizations that he's worked with, and overall, it's pretty awesome and exciting to see that they've had a lot of success. Congratulations to Dave Wilson on an incredible career at Toyota for the many years he worked at Toyota. It's sad to see him go. I think Tyler Gibbs has a lot of shoes to fill. Hopefully he can help, though, keep people around at the team and organization, and they don't lose people going into the future. Nonetheless, really interesting stuff to kind of see David Wilson is retiring at the end of the year. I'm glad to see he's going to go out hopefully on a high note. Toyota has had a big year so far. Their pace and speed has been extremely strong. I know David's been proud, and it'd be really cool to see for David Wilson's sake that organization or that manufacturer go out and with a bang, and they go out and win the championship. So we'll see what happens going into the remainder of this year. But Tyler Gibbs, like I said, is going to have a lot of shoes to fill. And I think Tyler Gibbs is going to be up for the challenge because he's done a lot of work with Toyota for many years. He's been with them for a long time. I think Tyler Gibbs will have a lot of shoes to fill, but I think he'll do a really solid and great job with them going into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Craftsman Truck Series. As it was reported by fellow NASCAR and Motorsports YouTuber Bray Carr, who has a lot of connections in the industry. He says there are going to be 2 Corys that will be racing in the Truck Series in 2025. That is very interesting. Obviously, NASCAR's silly season for trucks and Xfinity has not really gotten off to swing at this point. We are going to talk about Connor Zilisch here in just a second, but we now know that at least 2 Corys will be in the Truck Series for 2025. So which of those 2 Corys could it be? Well, the first one to think about is Corey Heim. Now, there's been talk about Corey Heim potentially moving up maybe to the Xfinity Series or even the Cup Series next year if the deal for Riley Herbst falls through at 23-11. But many people do believe that Corey Heim is going to remain in the Truck Series, including Bob Pockets as well. He expects that Corey Heim will stay in the Truck Series to continue driving for Tricon Garage in 2025, though there is a chance he can move up next year as well. The other Corey I think about is Corey Day potentially. Corey Day, of course, is a Chevy development driver, currently running full-time, of course, I think in the High Limit Series, and is going to make a couple more starts in ARCA later this year in Michigan. I think also at Bristol as well. Actually, Bristol, I think, later this year, and there's another race, if I remember correctly, that he's going to be running at, and I think at Salem at the end of the year as well. And then, of course, we will see him maybe make some truck starts in the future. There's been rumors of him maybe doing some cars late model tour races, so maybe he ends up going to Spire Motorsports and replacing a driver like Chase Purdy. That could be an option for him going into 2025. But another driver that could be going over there is Corey LaJoie, and I think this is the second driver who will be in the Truck Series next year. Bray Carr brought this up on his channel, but he's been hearing that potentially Corey LaJoie might have a good truck ride going into 2025. So my question is, what team could he go to? Could he somehow find a way to stay with Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series? That could be a possibility. What about McAnally Hilgeman Racing? We know there's rumors of Christian Eckes potentially moving up to Xfinity next year. Maybe he takes over the 19 truck going into next year. That could certainly be an option and a possibility. What about another team like ThorSport Racing, perhaps? That could be another option. We don't know what's going on with Jake Garcia. We don't know how much longer Matt Crafton's going to be there. We do expect that Ty Majeski and Ben Rose most likely will be back in the Truck Series with the team, but we could see Corey LaJoie end up at ThorSport Racing to try to rebuild his program. Corey LaJoie, at least in the Truck Series, does have a top 10 at Bristol in 2014, so at least you can say it has a top 10 on a non-super speedway. So we'll see what happens there. I think the 2 drivers, though, like I said, that do end up in the Truck Series next year are going to be Corey Heim and Corey LaJoie. I don't think Corey Day is going to be full-time in trucks. I could be wrong, and we might see a crazy move there, but I don't think that you're going to see Corey Day full-time in trucks. I think if he moves up, it'll be to Xfinity, honestly, because he probably wants to follow the Kyle Larson route, where he makes a few select Truck Series starts and moves up in 2013, moves up to Xfinity, and then moves up to Cup in 2014. Corey, I think in the long-term future, though, will end up maybe in the Hendrick Motorsports organization. Maybe he runs full-time with them. Who knows at this point, but we'll see what happens in regards to that. But it sounds like there'll be at least 2 Corys in the Truck Series in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Leigh Diffey. As it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that Leigh Diffey will make his NASCAR broadcast debut on NBC for his season debut at Daytona later this year on August 24th. So about 2.5 weeks from now, Leigh Diffey will make his debut. We've been expecting this for a while. Obviously, Leigh Diffey has been going over and covering the Olympics over the course of the last few weeks, and he's had that one best up call, but Leigh Diffey is still one of the best broadcasters out there. It's been rumored for the last few months. Adam Stern had initially reported that, I think back in April or May, that Leigh Diffey was expected to go over to NBC. Rick Allen is still expected, for those wondering. He will cover the next 2 weeks. He'll be in the booth at Richmond, and then he'll be in the booth at Michigan, and then we will see Leigh Diffey come back and do it. Now, a lot of people are wondering, is Leigh Diffey going to be covering IndyCar races going forward? According to support from Nathan Brown, from what he's been told, no, he will not be covering races in IndyCar going forward. It is going to be sad to see Leigh Diffey no longer covering IndyCar races, because I think Leigh Diffey has been a major addition for many, many years to the IndyCar booth. He's had some of the most iconic and incredible calls. Those calls the last couple of years for the Indianapolis 500 have just absolutely been phenomenal, amazing, and absolutely incredible. And I think that he is going to have a major asset, and he's done a lot of great things over there. But I'm also, at the same token, same time, very happy to see that Leigh Diffey is going to be coming over to NASCAR. Now, he has covered some NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series races before. Back in 2015, he did some select races, and also in 2017 as well. He did some select Cup Series races when Rick Allen was doing track and field back in 2017. He covered the Michigan race and covered the Watkins Glen race as well. That call where Kyle Larson went 4 wide when he's still driving for Chip Ganassi Racing was amazing. He called Chase Elliott's Richmond win in 2015. And overall, Leigh Diffey has done a great job, whatever he ends up doing. He's always been professional. He's always handled things with a lot of class. And he's one of the best commentators we have seen come through the ranks for many years. And I think him covering NASCAR is going to bring a lot of energy to the booth. When they lost Dale Jr. at the end of the last year, and Dale Jr. was going to be part of NBC because, of course, he's going to Amazon and TNT, a lot of people felt like they needed something new to happen. And I'm glad to see that they are going to be bringing someone new in to cover NASCAR races throughout the remainder of the year. So I'm very happy Leigh Diffey is going to be covering races. Leigh is an absolutely amazing commentator, one of the best we've ever seen. And I think a lot of people are going to be very happy that he'll be covering the championship. Just the energy going into Daytona, going in with a bang. He is going to bring a lot of energy to the booth, a lot of excitement, and I think he's going to do an excellent and amazing job covering races later this year. So I'm very happy. I'm excited for this for sure, and I think that Leigh Diffey is going to do an absolute amazing and great job covering the races later this year, covering the championship race especially, have Jimmy Johnson potentially up there working as well. I think it's really exciting overall for sure, and nonetheless glad to see that Leigh Diffey will be covering some NASCAR races, and I think he's going to overall do an amazing, fantastic, and great job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, Chris Rice went on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio on Wednesday morning, and he revealed that Kaulig Racing is starting to finalize their 2025 plans for the Cup Series program and the NASCAR Xfinity Series program, and he says they are getting very, very close to finalizing those plans for 2025. There's been a lot of rumors surrounding Kaulig Racing over the course of the last couple months. There's been rumors circulating that Kaulig Racing originally was going to merge with Trackhouse Racing for 2025, which Chris Rice shut those down back in late May to early June. Another rumor that's been kind of surfacing as well about is a potential merger between Kaulig Racing and Richmond Racing. And NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia had put out a tweet saying that he had heard there's like a 51% merger coming, but I'm not exactly sure if that is exactly true. Now, Kaulig Racing, we obviously know they've been kind of struggling over the course of the last year or so. They haven't had the pace and speed, not just in their Cup Series program, but in their Xfinity Series program as well. Even though we've seen Shane Van Gisbergen have a great year and get 3 wins, we are expecting that he will not be with Kaulig Racing in 2025, as he's expected to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series full time. So my question is, who could be behind the wheel of these seats going into next year? Christian Eckes potentially. We've heard rumors and speculation about Christian Eckes maybe moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series for 2025. Bob Poggers had initially reported that on his page, that Christian's been rumored to potentially move up to Xfinity, and we've heard Christian apparently had talks and conversations with Kaulig Racing. I think Christian's a really talented driver. He's done that all this year with McInerney Hogeman Racing. If you put him behind the wheel of a Kaulig Racing Xfinity Series car and give him select Cup Series starts potentially, I think that would be a really, really good move. Christian's a really good driver, in my opinion, always gets the best out of equipment. I don't know about Josh Williams staying, though, with Kaulig Racing going into 2025. Josh Williams has struggled immensely this year. They've changed a crew chief for him for the remainder of the year. I don't think Josh Williams has done a great job this year, unfortunately. I would imagine, yes, he brings sponsorship funding with him from StarTron and other companies that associate and work with him, but I don't think that he'll be back with Kaulig Racing next year. Maybe Brandon Jones comes to this team next year. That could be definitely interesting. We could see Brandon Jones return to JRM next year, but I'm not sure he'll be behind the wheel. Now, going to their Cup Series program, could Corey LaJoie go here? That could be a definite possibility, but we already talked about it, so there's a chance that he might be in the Truck Series next year. But I think Kaulig could be an option for Corey LaJoie, considering Celsius has worked with both of the entities and partners. I could definitely see him going over there next year. And then, of course, you have to think about A.J. Allmendinger. A.J. Allmendinger, there's a lot of speculation right now that A.J. Allmendinger may or may not be moving up to the Cup Series full-time in 2025 once again after being demoted to the Xfinity because of sponsorship issues, but it sounds like they might be moving him back up the Cup. I think having A.J. Allmendinger full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series next year is going to make a lot of sense. He's done a really good job on the road courses this year, and honestly, he was really good when he drove the 16 car. I mean, he had some decent runs even on the ovals this year where they've struggled to some of the other tracks with the other drivers. So I think having him behind the wheel in the Cup Series would make a lot of sense. Then Sam Mayer's been linked to Kaulig Racing as of late, potentially with their Cup program. We've seen Ryan Preece linked to this organization. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to Kaulig Racing for the remainder of the year because they're planning some big stuff over there. There could be some other things happening. Maybe Austin Hill finds a way into 31 car full-time. He originally was supposed to go to Kaulig Racing full-time in Cup this year. For all that fell through. Who knows at this point? I don't know about Daniel Hemrick's future at Kaulig Racing. I'd imagine he probably will be out of Kaulig at the end of the year, at least full-time, just because he's got a sponsorship, but he's not been running that well in Cup this year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Kaulig Racing, see where everything kind of goes at this point. But I imagine Kaulig Racing is planning some pretty big moves, and we'll see what their announcement will be and when their announcement will be and see what drivers end up over at that organization in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. As it was announced on Wednesday early morning and confirmed that Connor Zilisch will join Junior Motorsports full-time in 2025, driving the number 88 car. We already talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but there's been some new information that's come out. It is expected that WeatherTech is going to be basically the major sponsor, and we know Trackhouse Racing is expected to work with this organization for 2025 and really help the program as well, considering Justin Marks and Dale Jr. do have a partnership in the Cars Tour. They work together over there. This move makes a lot of sense, and obviously with the rumors of the merger coming with RCR and Kaulig, I don't think going over to Kaulig would have happened. Connor Zilisch, for all of those who do not know, is one of the best young prospects we have seen come through the ranks in many years. Just to give you guys a lot of this guy's accomplishments, he has won an FIA karting championship in the U.S. and Europe, the first driver to win a championship for FIA in karting outside of the U.S. from the United States. He's also won three ARCA races in the main series in 3 starts this year, and will be running in Michigan in the 28 car later this year. He's also won 4 ARCA East races this year. Of the 6 races that have happened, Williams-Walsh has won the other 2 races that have happened there. He's also won the LMP2 class in the Rolex 24, and he's also won the LMP2 class in the Sebring 12 Hours. And he will be almost in his Truck Series debut. He nearly won that race. Came back from having like a broken sway bar or something like that. And he nearly went out and still won that race and finished in 4th because he used his stuff up trying to get up through the field. Keep in mind, he just turned 18 years old. But he is one of the best prospects we've seen come through the ranks. Many people are coining him the next Kyle Larson, just as people are calling Kyle Larson the next Jeff Gordon. Many people are calling Connor Zilisch the next Kyle Larson. It's kind of understandable because we've seen Connor Zilisch do extremely well in everything that he's gotten into. Now, what are my realistic expectations for Connor Zilisch in 2025? Realistically, I think Connor Zilisch is going to win at least 2 or 3 races next year, and I think he probably has a shot at winning the championship. We know for 100% that he is going to be an absolute favorite to win on road courses in 2025. He's been amazing on road course in the lower series. We know his road course speed. He was super fast at COTA. He's going to be running at Watkins Glen, and we know he's going to have a chance and opportunity to win there, though he's going to have to go up against Shane Van Gisbergen and drivers like Eric Almirola as well in that race. But I think that he's going to have a really good chance and opportunity to go out there and win multiple races next year. And even on the ovals, too, he's been really good on the ovals as well in the lower series. So I think he's going to have a really good year next year. Now, we don't know who the crew chief is going to be at this point. Maybe it's going to be someone we don't know. Maybe it's going to be like someone who's part of the organization. Who knows at this point? But I think Connor Zilisch is going to have a very strong and solid year in 2025. So what does this mean for the remainder of the Junior Motorsports lineup? Well, we are expecting that Sammy Smith is going to be back in the 8 car, according to Bob Pockers. He brings sponsorship from Pilot Flying J, which has worked with Junior Motorsports in the past. So I imagine that they'll be working with him in 2025. Obviously, there's other drivers like Justin Allgaier who are expected to be back in the 7. Brandon Jones was not mentioned. We don't know if he'll be back with JRM going into next year. Carson Quaffle's another name that a lot of people are talking about as well as a potential candidate to go full-time with this organization. I could see him driving the 9 next year, but also Brandon Jones might go back to Junior Motorsports. That could be a potential possibility. But going back to Connor Zilisch, I'm very happy for this dude. He is super talented, one of the best young kids I've ever seen come through the ranks, and I think in the next years he'll be in Cup. So he has a pathway to Cup in the future with Trackhouse. Obviously, if you're Daniel Suarez or even Ross Chastain at this point, you kind of need to be watching your toes and start performing. Mainly Daniel Suarez, obviously, because Daniel Suarez, I don't know how much longer he's going to be with Trackhouse, but we are expecting that he is going to sign a multi-year contract extension with Trackhouse Racing. But I think Connor, with how young he is, he has stated this publicly that he wants to be the youngest Cup Series champion ever. Bill Rexford is that youngest champion at 23 years old. So he's got about 4 or 5 years to get it done. But I think there's anybody that could absolutely do it. It is Connor Zilisch. So I'm very happy for Connor and glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for Junior Motorsports full-time in 2025. I expect him to be really strong in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer. Now, obviously, I did not mention Sam Mayer when it comes to drivers that are expected to return to Junior Motorsports in 2025. We are expecting Justin Allgaier is going to be back in the 7. Sammy Smith is going to be back in the 8 car. We know Connor Zilisch will be in the 88 car, and there's a chance that Brandon Jones might be back with the team next year. But like I said, I did not mention Sam Mayer. According to Bob Pockers and Brake Hard, it sounds like Sam Mayer may not potentially be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2025. Sam Mayer has been driving for Junior Motorsports at least on a part-time basis since 2021 and started driving full-time for the team in 2022. Sam Mayer has had a really good last about a year or so. In the last 7 or 8, basically he's in the last about a year and a half, he has won 6 races. And basically 4 of those in the last 10 to 15 races in 2023. And then in 2024, he's already scored 2 victories. But this isn't a really major shock or surprise considering all the rumors that have been going around about Sam Mayer. There has been talk and possibly Sam Mayer might be moving up to the Cup Series in 2025. So let's say Sam Mayer moves up the Cup next year. Where could he go? Well, obviously the 7 car for Spire Motorsports could be an option for 2025. But it sounds like that Justin Haley is the frontrunner. Everyone believes in the industry that Justin Haley is the lead candidate right now to drive the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports, despite the fact he technically does have a multi-year contract with the organization. We do believe that Justin Haley is going to end up back over at Spire and driving the number 7 car potentially in 2025. So I think that ride is off the table. What about Kaulig Racing? The 31 car, like I mentioned earlier, could be available for 2025. That could be a possibility. He does bring sponsorship with you, him that being Sam Mayer, but I'm not exactly sure if that is going to be a possibility if they bring someone over there like an AJ Allmendinger or an Austin Hill. And then another one we talked about is Front Row. Front Row has been a big rumor surrounding Sam Mayer over the last couple months, and many people, at least if he goes Cup race, believe he's going to end up at Front Row in 2025. But I don't know if Sam Mayer is going there because a lot of the new rumor that's been going around is that Zane Smith is going to end up getting that Front Row seat in 2025. So I don't know if we'll see Sam Mayer Front Row. So if he doesn't go Cup Series racing, where could he go into the NASCAR Xfinity Series? Because I think if he doesn't go Cup racing, I think he stays in Xfinity. Well, what about the Haas factory team? There are drivers they're looking at for next year. Sam brings a little funding and sponsorship over there, but there's been rumors of Sheldon Creed, Hailie Deegan recently. Obviously, of course, other drivers like Ryan Preece have been linked over there. Matty D's been linked over there. So I don't know if that would be an option, but I think that would be a really good option for Haas if they're wanting to be super competitive, because they're going to be losing Cole Custer, and they're probably going to be losing Riley Herbst as he's going Cup racing next year. Could he go over to Joe Gibbs and go to Toyota? That could be a possibility, but he doesn't really like Ty Gibbs, so I don't know if that's going to be an option there. You do have Kaulig Racing, which could be an option for next year. Kaulig is, in my opinion, would be a really good option. I think Sam would be able to win some road course races. We know how good the road course program is. We know how good their super speedway program is, so we know that that could be a potential possibility. But I don't really know what happens with Sam Mayer going into 2025 at this point. But I think Sam Mayer has really gotten better. We know he wants to go Cup Series racing. There's no denying that. And I think Sam Mayer in the Cup Series next year would be a really good move for his racing career, right? I think Sam's got a lot of talent. He is a good race car driver, in my opinion, and he can sometimes get the best out of equipment. So I think Sam Mayer could end up in a lot of different places next year. If you want my prediction, I think he ends up maybe a Kaulig Racing's Xfinity program. I think that 11 car could go to Christian Eckes. With AJ potentially moving up, I think having a lineup of Christian Eckes and Sam Mayer would be a really good lineup, and I think it'd be a really good revamp for Kaulig, because Kaulig's program has been struggling immensely, but if they're able to find a way to work with some other teams to really build their program up, I think if you have Sam Mayer over there to really help that program per se, I think that Sam Mayer will be able to really help get things kind of straightened out and get things really in the right direction for that team and organization. So I think Sam Mayer may end up at Kaulig Racing, but it does sound like from a lot of the indications that Sam Mayer may or may not be returning over there to Junior Motorsports. We'll see if it comes true, and we'll see if he does not, in fact, get back over at Junior Motorsports in 2025. We'll see what happens in regards to next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, this was kind of a minor story on social media, but kind of an underrated story. But it was reported by Toby Christie from TobyChristie.com that Shane Van Gisbergen will no longer have Bruce Schlicker as a crew chief for the remainder of this year. Kevin Walter, who's been the crew chief for Josh Williams all year long, will be the new crew chief for Shane Van Gisbergen for the remainder of this year. And Eddie Pardue, who's been the crew chief for the number 10 car at times, will be moving up to crew chief for Josh Williams for the remainder of the year. This came as a shock to me and a lot of people, because Bruce Schlicker has been with Kaulig Racing for a very, very long time. Going back to basically when the organization started, he has led drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen, AJ Allmendinger to victories. He got Jeb Burton a win, and he's also got other drivers in the organization, some wins as well. Bruce Schlicker is one of the best crew chiefs in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and he was the best crew chief that Kaulig Racing had this year. So we're not exactly sure what happened. We weren't really given the details out of respect for him, but this is definitely a major, major shock. And it really is a shame too, because when you look at Shane Van Gisbergen this year, SVG has had a really good year, all things considered. He's had, of course, 3 road course wins so far, those coming at Portland, Sonoma, and, of course, at Chicago. And let's be real, he should have a 4th win this year from Circuit of the Americas. But he's also gotten better on ovals as well. Recently, the pace and speed has been improving. He's had top 10, top 15 speed on a week-by-week basis. And Shane, of course, just recently finished in the top 5 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 4th place on pure speed nonetheless. And I think that him losing him is going to be a little bit of a disadvantage, considering we are very, very close to the playoffs. Now, Shane has a really good chance to still make it to the round of 8 this year, because we do know the pace and speed of him on road courses has been great. But he's gotten better on all other types of tracks as well. Having a new voice in his ear is going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for him, because Kevin Walter, you look at what he's done with Josh Williams. He was originally the engineer, of course, for Josh Berry last year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022 as well, when he did have a lot of success as the engineer for Josh. But he only had a little bit of limited experience to crew chief, and I think it's hurt Josh Williams this year, where Josh has ran about as bad as he's done with DGM Racing, where he did good at DGM, but he has struggled in the Xfinity Series with Kaulig Racing this year. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of rumors that Josh may no longer be with the organization after this year. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for Shane Van Gisbergen for the remainder of the year. But at the same time, getting sometimes a disadvantage can be really helpful as well. Now, realistically, I think Shane will suffer a little bit in performance, but not a lot. I think Michigan will be a really good track for Shane because he obviously needs all the experience, right? Because we know he's going to make some cup starts at the end of this year. And we obviously do know as well that SVG is a really, really good road course racer. We know he's going to be a favorite to win that cup race at Watkins Glen. And we do think that Shane, obviously, we know there's been a lot of talk that Shane will be moving up to the Cup Series next year to drive full-time for Trackhouse Racing in 2025. They are expected to purchase a third charter. All the reports are coming out. We are waiting for the charter agreement, of course, to get finalized before I think that ends up happening. But I don't think it'll be long before SVG will be announced to the Cup Series. But having a new crew chief around the time of the playoffs is really interesting. And it's kind of a shame, too, because SVG's been the winningest driver so far. If you would have told me coming into this year that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to be the winningest driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series so far this year, nearly to the playoffs, I probably would have laughed at you. Not because I don't think Shane Van Gisbergen is talented. I just thought drivers like Chandler Smith and even AJ Allmendinger were going to win. And AJ not being as good as SVG this year has been really, really shocking because I think SVG's been even getting better on the ovals this year. But having a new crew chief is going to hurt Shane for the remainder of the year. But I am glad to see that at least that Shane will have someone new to work with. Maybe we'll see them build chemistry instantly because he's going to have a new voice in his ear. But I think that chemistry could be felt very, very quickly. And Kevin's going to have to learn the lingo of what Shane really wants on those cars because, again, you don't get a lot of practice in these cars and you don't get a lot of that time to kind of figure out what is going on. But at the same token and same time, I'm very happy that I'm not happy about this for Shane because it's going to be a big disadvantage for him. But at least Shane will have a new voice in his ear. At least as someone who's at the organization. Kevin's probably over there at a lot of the competition meetings we'll call it. So he probably understands Shane a little bit, but I'm not exactly sure if they're going to gel. Now watch all of a sudden these two work together and just gel and he starts getting top fives on ovals. That'd be huge. Again, it could hurt his chance to win an oval at the end of the year. I think his goal by the end of the year is to try to win on an oval because he's getting better on the oval tracks. We'll see what ends up happening. But having a new voice in his ear, like I mentioned, is going to be a little bit of a disadvantage for Shane this year. So we'll see what ends up happening, see if it does affect their performance. I really hope it doesn't affect Shane's performance because Shane has been exceptional in the Xfinity Series this year. And obviously, like I mentioned, we do know more than likely moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series next year full-time with Trackhouse. We're waiting for the charter agreement, like I said, to get finished and done. We'll see what ends up happening, and we'll see what happens with the charter agreement. But we do expect that Shane will be full-time, but he will have a new crew chief for 2025. For the render year, I should say. So, that is today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links are below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you think Shane's going to perform with his new crew chief? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And where do you think Sam Mayer ends up if he doesn't return to JRM? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. There should not be any more videos dropping today unless some major news breaks throughout the rest of the day. Tomorrow we're going to have reactions to Cup Series qualifying for Richmond, and we're also going to have the Truck Series race review. Then on Sunday we'll have the starting lineup video for the Cookout 400, and we'll have the race review for the Cookout 400. And Monday we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.